Mr. Percy Brown Jr. He is with North Star Counseling Services and is the CEO. He is a nationally recognized educational leader with extensive experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives across multiple industries. Percy Brown Jr. has a proven track record of effectively working with and supporting school districts, municipalities, law enforcement agencies, service-based industries, as well as private corporations. Percy deeply understands the challenges schools, service-based industries, and communities face. He is committed to listening, learning, collaborating, and working alongside organizations to customize an experience that will result in sustainable change. Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Percy Brown Jr.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. My eyes are glued on this beautiful hardwood floor. Thunderbird Nation, how y'all doing this morning? I would hate to be a basketball player in this gym. Can I get like some Thunderbird Nation? We down by 2, I'm coming down and I'm about to pull up on Dr. Briggs for the game-winning 3. Thunderbird Nation, how y'all feeling this morning? That's what's up. Dr. Briggs and I, we always like to go back and forth about who the better basketball player was. We grew up in the same hood. I'm a few years older than him, and so I used to spank on him. Just gonna put it out there in space like that. But hey, I'm really glad to be in the space this morning. That introduction said that I do a lot of stuff, but in a nutshell, I would just like to say, you know, I mean, when it all said and done, the work that I do is just humanitarian work. Or I like to consider myself the Dr. King of education, and I've been in the game of education now for over 20 years. Prior to me getting into education, I really pursued a life of basketball. When I was in high school, I was, you know, watching Jordan and Pippen night in and night out. Still got Jordans on at 50 years old. I was able to take it to the college level. And then ended up coaching AAU for several years and coached high school basketball. I was an assistant coach for a state championship team back in '09, but I also had an opportunity to work with an NBA player. So good friend from the community, he's kind of like my little brother. Reese Gaines was first round draft pick to the Orlando Magic the same year that LeBron James was drafted. And so being able to have that experience was super amazing. And while I enjoy kind of like the NBA life and stuff like that, it's really the work that I do now that is the most rewarding. But in all of that, you know, humanitarian work has been an amazing experience for me. I love the human family. And one thing that has allowed me to really connect and grow in the way that I have is to have love and respect for humanity. Regardless of where you come from, regardless of where you look like, I'm always trying to connect on a human level, right? I've traveled the world, you know, I've studied like the Mayan ruins. I just went to Egypt this past summer and engaged in a 2-week study tour, which was life-changing. Going into the big pyramid of Giza and going up that narrow tunnel all the way up into the King's Chamber, it literally changed my life, because one thing that I learned while I was out there is that the ancient Egyptians, you know, they believed that all elements of life had value, right? Even to the animals, right? Like they highly valued life, but they highly valued each other as a human family. And they understood thousands of years ago, right, that all life is based on energy. Without energy, we don't live, right? And when we think about energy, there's 2 types of energy. There's positive energy and negative energy, right? And how we show up every day, we are either going to emit positive energy or negative energy. And a lot of times what we emit is what we get back. We might not get it back right away, but we get it back, right? So I want you all to think about that. Like when you come to school every single day, how are you showing up? Or when you wake up every morning, are you walking your walk with positive energy, or is it negative energy that's driving that, right? And so I want to talk about and make sure that you all think about how powerful positive energy is, right? Because of that, man, I've had experiences that I cannot believe, right? Like being able to be in community with LeBron James and NBA Hall of Famers. I personally know Senator Ron Johnson. I know the current governor of Wisconsin, former governor of Wisconsin, Jim Doyle. And I do believe that I've had these doors of opportunities open for me because of my love for humanity and my ability to respect each and every single human being, right? And that's what this conversation is about. I was actually here a few years ago, so I know that there might be a group of students that saw me come and have a conversation about the history of the N-word back in middle school, right? So that was several years ago. So if you remember a black guy coming and talking about the history of the N-word in middle school, that's me. I know I look a little bit different because I got more gray hair than I did back then. But we'll go ahead and get my reason for being here off the ground. 70 years ago, May 17, 1954. Does anybody know what happened 70 years ago in this country on May 17? No? Raise your hands if you've ever heard of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Okay, some of y'all know what that is. So in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court made racial segregation in schools illegal. Right, so prior to 1954, there was no way in the world that this high school would look like this. So times have changed, right? And it was also during that time period that my father was growing up in the Mississippi Delta, and so when he started school, he didn't go to school with white kids. And my grandfather was an educator, and they believed in racial equality, right? Because my family is someone, I would say my family is humanitarian as well, right? And so because of that, when my father was in high school, when he was in middle school, him and his 5 brothers and sisters, they were marching, they were protesting, engaging in sit-ins, trying to create a better life for themselves, right? Because they knew that education was the one thing that could level the playing field for anybody, regardless of where you come from or regardless of what you look like. And they were willing to fight for that, right? And some of the costs of that fight was when my dad, I think he might have been in middle school, maybe a freshman in high school, state troopers came, arrested like 100 and some kids, put them on a school bus and then sent them to a maximum security prison, Parchman, Mississippi. In there for several nights. No food, sleeping on the iron cot bed, and then force-fed milk of magnesia or laxative. Right, so imagine being in high school and having that kind of experience. My dad was the first African-American male to integrate the all-white high school in the 1960s in the community that he grew up in. His aunt was the year before him. But those experiences were crazy for them. Like imagine being a high school student and being escorted into the building by the National Guard, right? Soldiers with rifles, making sure that you're safe walking into the school. But while dealing with all that, they got spit on every single day, got called the N-word and all other kind of things under the sun. When they were in school, there's no way in the world you would see, a mixture of students sitting together. More than likely, my dad would be all the way at the top by himself for a school assembly. My dad was a pretty good basketball player. Actually, the high school coach at the white school wasn't a bad guy. He saw my dad and was like, hey, I think you should try out for the basketball team. But as the basketball season was approaching, all the other conference teams, the head coaches of the basketball program, because they weren't integrating their schools, they called the coach and said, if you bring any black players into the gym, they're not gonna make it home alive. Right, so my dad wasn't able to play high school basketball simply because of the color of his skin. But then his junior year in high school, April 4th, 1968, Dr. King was assassinated. He walks into his classroom the following day as the only black student, and on the blackboard it said, I'm glad that N-I-G-G-E-R is dead. And he left it up there all day, and the teacher left it up there all day. Traumatizing, right? And because my family was just simply trying to fight for equality, right? Trying to, especially by way of education, there were folks in the community that just didn't like it. And so my dad, when he was in 6th or 7th grade, and this is my last story, I'm gonna move on, just kind of laying context, right? Something woke him up in the middle of the night. He walks to the front window, pulls the curtains back, raise your hand if you know, if you've heard of the KKK. Y'all heard of the Ku Klux Klan? All right. Pulls the curtain back, and there's like 5 or 6 Klan members in there. White robes and hoodies, and they're burning like a 12-foot cross in front of my grandparents' house. And typically that meant your home would be bombed within 24 hours. Right, thank goodness that didn't happen, because I probably wouldn't be here having this conversation with you. And I'm laying that out for you for 2 reasons. First, I'm standing on giants, because my family dealt with pure, real hate. I mean, hate. But did they turn to hate to fight the hate? No, they did not. They followed the leadership and the vision of Dr. King by taking a nonviolent approach to change that they wanted to see, not just in their communities, but for across this nation. Right, and so here we are in 2024, and I think just this past school year, I think I've had this conversation with about 30,000 students across the United States of America, because something has changed. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about it, because there are things that have happened to you all as a generation that I think has triggered this uptick in how we treat each other as human beings. Right, this is a small community. Right, y'all should be Thunderbird Nation inside out. But what does that look like and feel like, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the U.S. government tracks hate speech and bullying and sexual harassment and all of that, right? And the statistics aren't up there, but about 25% of high school students are going to experience some version of bullying, harassment, slurs hurled at them, sexual assault, even rape. Right? But as students are interfacing with these things in their learning environment, it is creating mental health effects on the targeted group. And with the mental health issues that come from being targeted with hate, it will impact their education, their overall well-being, and then ultimately will determine their income status. Right? And I know as young people sometimes, when you're hurling things around in the space, talking about other groups of people, oh, I'm just joking around, I ain't really mean it like that. Right? That's your intent. But we got to think about the impact that it's having on the targeted group. Because I want to believe deep down in my heart and soul that as a Thunderbird Nation, you don't have to love everybody, but I will hope that as a small community, you would want everybody to get a high quality education. Right? But when kids are coming in and having these experiences, you're taking away from them receiving an equal education. And that's coming from our U.S. government doing its research on how this impacts young people in the learning environment, right? And so I just want to put into the space that, when we're talking about other groups of people, there really isn't anything funny about it, right? Why can't we raise our levels of consciousness and if we need to crack jokes about climate change, or maybe, crack jokes about trees, or crack jokes about the other high school, not the students in the high school, right? Like, let's use our creativity, because these things are having impact. But this is how it's having impact. What you see right here is the secret to life, or the secret to success for your life, right? You see a pyramid right there, and at the top, it's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've taken an AP psychology class, maybe you've learned about this, but if you haven't, every single adult in here that's an educator, whoever is in this space that went to college to become a teacher, had to learn about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because what that tells us as educators, the people that are responsible for helping you develop into becoming who you were meant to be, we have to know what it takes to develop a human being. And this pyramid right here lays out every single thing every human being needs, regardless of your skin color, your income status, where you live. We all need these things in order to find our reason for being on this earth. And it starts with the baseline, the physiological needs. Basic things like sleep, water, rest, warmth, those things right there. Schools play a part in providing that for you, right? You got a cafeteria out there, you get lunch, you get breakfast, got nice water fountains, right? So we've got that for you. You don't have to go to school outside. I mean, me and Dr. Briggs, we were doing some work with a school district where their cafeterias are literally outside. Now, it's warm most of the year, right? But when it rains, it's difficult for them to have lunch without getting wet. Right? So every human being needs that. This district provides elements of that for you. The next one is about safety. And you might not be able to see it, but that first bullet point is personal security. The school is responsible for your personal security. Whenever I come into Baraboo or other school districts, I can't just walk into the school. I've got a buzz. Who are you? Percy Brown. Why are you here? I'm here. Boom, they let me in, then I gotta sign this sheet, then I gotta take a picture, and then I get a nice little sticker. Right, so the school is making sure that you're safe every single day that you walk up in here. But how are we making sure that as a class of peers that we're making sure that we're not violating other people's personal security? And what I mean by that is, I've heard it here and I've heard it in other districts. I was just at the middle school. You know, sometimes we like to be mean with each other and make threats of go kill yourself. Or there might be students that make threats to other students around sexual assault, rape, or other things that can violate somebody's safety. Right, and these are things that we shouldn't be laughing about. When I was in high school, I had a buddy that was bullied, and they committed suicide. Shotgun. Right, so for me, when I hear kids, you know, targeting other students and talking bad about them, I'm like, man, how can that be funny? When we're part of the same family. Again, our DNA is exactly the same. Our blood bleeds the same. Just because we might have different hair texture or skin color, that doesn't really separate us from where we all began. Right? And so, why would we want to violate somebody's pyramid for the sake of jokes? And then that next one, belonging, friendship, and sense of connection. Right? The government says that if kids are coming into school and they're being bullied and harassed, or slurs are being thrown all over the space, or we're making homophobic comments, we're killing their ability to feel a sense of connection, because kids are walking into a hostile environment. Friendship. You know, one thing that trips me out a little bit, I had white friends growing up when I was at Madison West. Some of my closest friends were white. One kid, Alex Compton, who was a better basketball player than me, I hate to admit it, but he was a big fan of Ice Cube and NWA. Right? Listened to him hardcore. But one day, you know, he kind of pulled me to the side. He's like, bro, I'm like, what's up, man? He's like, man, you know I love Ice Cube. I'm rocking Ice Cube in my car, and I like to sing along, and he just asked me. He's like, bro, can I say the N-word? I'm like, no, man, yeah, that's not a good idea. He said respect and left it at that. Right? I didn't have to give him this detailed explanation because I think he understood. And the reason why I said, no, bro, you can't do that is because I know that he was going to be going to other places across the country, probably interacting with other black people. Right, and if I would have given him permission to use that word and he thinks it's okay, and then he goes somewhere around black folks that he doesn't know and he drops that word, more than likely he's gonna get whooped. Right, so I wasn't going to set my friend up like that, but I don't know if it's exactly happening here, but I know it's been happening at every other school that I've worked with, where, you know, we have these interracial friendships and racial jokes are going back and forth. The white kids are asking their black friends for the N-word pass. Like, that's not cool, y'all. That word in itself is just dehumanizing. And I would say that about any slur. Right? Sometimes females, and when they're in their friend groups, they like to use the B word with each other. Right? And I would push and challenge you to think about that. right? It may seem like, oh, we're using it as a term of endearment, but it's still derogatory towards who you are as a human being. So you're actually engaging in 1,000 cuts to yourself, 1,000 slivers, which creates a slow death, right? Sometimes we don't think about the consequences of our actions and the words that we use. And then the last one, which is right before self-actualization, or you finding your purpose and your reason for being, is all about respect and self-esteem. That should be self-explanatory, right there. What is it going to take for the Thunderbird Nation? And you don't have to love each other, you don't have to like each other, but how can you come into the space and just have respect for one another? Because the moment that you don't do that and you start making derogatory comments about, students with disabilities, or you're teasing kids, and then I heard that that's an issue. The way certain students are being treated and teased in the cafeteria, I don't understand why. Especially for a student that didn't have any control over the situation that they're in. None of us have control over how we came into this world. So why are we attacking somebody because they might be different than who we are? Why do we have to look at a student just because they may not seem normal to us and then we decide to clown them in the cafeteria? Right? Some of you all, you never know what's going to end up happening in your life. You might have a child one day with a disability. And then how are you going to feel as a parent if your child comes home talking about, man, these kids are talking about me because I have a disability? It's going to come back around full circle. Sometimes the world just works like that. But why do we have to think like that? Like, why are we bringing that negative energy into space in the first place? Right? I mean, man, this school should have state championships upside down all around. But that's all built on school spirit, school pride, which is driven by positive energy, not negative energy. Right? And so we want everybody's pyramid to be intact so that we can all find our reason for being. Let's just think about the energy that we bring into the space. Because I'm 50 years old. I don't have too much time left. So I'm going out fighting a good fight, trying to fight for humanity. Because y'all are gonna have to deal with the stuff that my generation and the generations before me laid for you. College debt, you're gonna have to deal with that. Climate change, you're going to have to deal with that. And some of these other issues that cannot be solved if we are not able to work together. And I hope you're listening to me, because I'm not just talking out the side of my neck. I'm accomplished. I have these conversations at Harvard, Columbia, other institutions of higher learning. Like, I know what I'm talking about, and I hope that you're listening. Because there are some things that are confronting us, not just as a nation, but as a world, that's threatening humanity. And only humanity can solve it. And we ain't gonna be able to solve it if we're always in conflict with each other and fighting each other. But again, right, we want everybody to hit the top of that pyramid. And we all need these basic fundamental things, right? But some of that stuff, you all are responsible for making sure everybody can get it. Because you do have the power to violate that based on how you show up every single day. Right, but I gotta be honest with you. It hasn't always been that way. You all are actually history. You all have made history as a generation of young people. But before I get into that, this is for the adults and for you. But before I share this, and this is things you can do to disrupt the bullying, the harassment, the hate speech, and some of the things, like I didn't want to get into the details because I got the details of what goes on every day. I don't need to share that with y'all because y'all know what it is. Right? But the first step is take personal responsibility. Like, what is it going to take for you to be a respectful human being, right? Which first begins with self-respect, love for self. If you have self-respect and you love yourself, it's easier to bring that positive energy and be respectful towards other people in the human family. That's the first thing, right? Because y'all are almost grown. The seniors, you are on your way. The rest of you, 2 years out. And some of the things that I'm hearing, if you bring it into the workspace, you will lose your career before it even gets started. School for you should be your job preparing you for your job. I know of teachers in Wisconsin that have used slurs, whether at students or just using it, that have lost their job. I was in California doing this work with a school district, and I opened up the newspaper and I'm reading a story about a police officer from San Diego. This police officer was off duty, texting his friend, and one thing in the text thread was, "I hate black people." And then that was followed by more text messages with the N-word, and the police department found out about it and he got fired on the spot. And this is something that he did when he wasn't on duty. Right, and you all are in the social media world where you're posting things. Some of you all are posting hateful things about different groups of people. And then you think you delete it off your phone and you think you're in the clear. The digital footprint is real. We might have a future U.S. Senator up in here. We might have a future U.S. Supreme Court Justice up in here. And the choices you make today, especially on social media, if that's your aim, you better be really mindful of what you put into that space, because I can promise you, everything you're doing on social media and you posting and the pictures and stuff like that is sitting on a server. It will come back and get you 20 years from now or 15 years from now. It's a real thing. But how y'all, do you know about the digital footprint? Are you mindful of what you put out there can come back and get you 10 or 15 years from now? I didn't have to deal with that. Most of the adults in there didn't have to deal with that because we didn't have the technology, right? So personal responsibility, but then in the moment, right? Like if you're a person that's like, man, I don't get down like that. Like, Mr. Brown, I'm a humanitarian just like you. If you hear a group of students using derogatory language or inappropriate language or language that's not school appropriate, or threatening another student, right? The first thing you do is just interrupt. Hold on, what's going on? Did you just say that? I don't really like what you said, right? But then you ask questions like, why did you say that? Tell me more. Like engage them, put the person on the spot in a respectful way. And then you follow that with some education. And the education is simple, I just gave it to you. You just need to remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right? So if the kid's pushing back, like, I'm just playing around, it's like, hey man, you don't know who's around you. You might be messing up somebody's pyramid. The Maslow pyramid. And then there's the echo, which means that we all play our part, and when we hear, we say something about it. Dr. Briggs and I were actually doing some work, and we were meeting with a group of Latino students. And you know, we having a conversation, and all of a sudden this Latino student just dropped the N-word loud, right? I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, what? I'm like, hold on. I'm like, bro. And he's looking at me like, what, man? I'm like, did I just hear what came out of your mouth? He's like, huh? I said, did you just say the N-word? Yeah. Why did you say the N-word? That's just kind of what we do, man. You know, I didn't mean it like that. Well, what gives you reason to say the N-word? Well, some of my friends are black. But do you know what that word means? No. Do you know the history behind the word? No. So I'm like, well, why are you using a word where you have no understanding of what it is or what it means? And he was just like wide-eyed and confused. And so then I got out of the question realm and started to educate him. And once I finished the education, Dr. Briggs came right behind and echoed everything that I said. And once that meeting was over with, me and that student had a conversation for about 20 minutes, and he initiated the conversation. It was a great conversation, right? Like he had no understanding. And I flat out told him, I said, hey man, I said, you lucky. I don't promote violence, but I'm like, if I was in high school and you said that, I don't know, man, my response might have been a little different. But in that conversation, he's like, I know I probably won't be able to stop it using it right away, but he said, because of this conversation, I'm going to be thinking more deeply about it, right? So interrupt, question, educate, and echo. But here's what's going on, y'all. This is why I said you are history. You have made history. This group of school-age children is the first group of people in this country in more than 100 years that was removed from society. The last time this country dealt with something like the COVID pandemic, which every last one of y'all went home March 13th, 2020, Friday the 13th, I remember it. It was the Spanish flu back in the 1920s. Right? So y'all literally were removed from society for almost 2 years and then hooked into virtual learning where you were on devices for at least 8 hours a day. But then, as I'm talking to students, I'm like, well, when you went home, how did you stay in community with your friends? We started getting social media apps. We started connecting with friends on online gaming, right? So you literally were unplugged from human interaction in person to now living your lives and entering communities that aren't real. Yeah, y'all had connections with your friends, but when you start liking and following a lot of other people, your community expands, and now you interface with people that you might not even really know. Right? And just at the middle school, I would say about 80 to 90% of the students were like, yeah, we're on social media or we're online gaming every day for like 3-4 hours a day. Raise your hands if you know who Steve Jobs is. And raise your hands if you know who Bill Gates is. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Right, we have the smartphone because of Steve Jobs, the iPhone, right? Here's the thing. They did not let their children touch any technology until they were 14 years old. Because they knew what it would do to the development of your brain as young people, going through adolescence. The schools that the uber rich go to, like the kids of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, they go to Waldorf. Look up Waldorf. Look at their school system. There is no technology in their schools. So why is it that the kids of the uber rich don't have technology, but y'all one-to-one? And why is it that we're allowing young people to engage in devices when the creators of it didn't even let their own children use it? The reason why is because it is rewiring your brain. And what do I mean by that? Raise your hand if you ever heard of the word bias. Okay. The definition is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in an unfair way. Why is this important? It's because of the social media apps that y'all are on every day. How many of y'all know that when you get on your social media apps or you're on the internet, there are programs back there learning everything about you? Raise your hands if you know that. Okay, some of you. You better wake up. Every time you're spending 3 or 4 hours on your social media apps or on these gaming devices, there are these algorithms that are studying everything about you, right? Here's an example. So if you're just messing around and you Google something racist or homophobic, that algorithm is going to pick it up and it's going to continue to feed you information that's aligned to that because that's what it thinks you like. Right? And so now if you're spending that many hours on a social media app and you're getting one narrative, right? It keeps feeding you what it thinks you like. Now you've entered an echo chamber. Well, that's all you're getting. And if you don't realize that, right, when you're allowing that much information to go on your brain is a computer. And so those are the things that you're learning. Right? So it's influencing how you think, and when it influences how you think, it's going, your thinking turns up in your actions. Y'all know about AI, right? Raise your hand if you know about AI. Keep your hands up if you think AI is smarter than you. Right. So they already have algorithms on the back end of these social media apps learning everything about you, and that's all about consumerism. Right? They learn everything about you, they learn what you like, they learn about what you like, and then they send those ads to you to make you want to go buy stuff. But think about when they add AI to those algorithms. If the AI is already smarter than you, and you're not aware of how the algorithms are driving certain types of information towards you, who's to say that AI won't start outthinking you when they add it? How are you going to know what you're interfacing with? Like, AI is so crucial. I just heard a story where somebody took the voice of a high school principal and through AI was able to develop a script of the principal speaking words sounded exactly like him, but it wasn't him. And it was something that actually made him lose his job. A kid playing a joke like that, right? And so if AI gets behind the machine and you don't know it, and if you're spending multiple hours on these gaming devices or on social media, you need to be worried. Because it might start controlling you without you even knowing it. It might sound crazy, but it's real. Because it's already changing how you think and how you act. Because what I'm seeing across the country around, like just how we disrespect each other, it wasn't always like that. It really started with the smartphone coming out and all these different apps, and then the biases because of the algorithms that are on the back end. Online gaming. 9 out of 10 kids either experience or witness harassment, slurs, the whole nine, right? So if you on Fortnite or Roblox or whatever y'all get into, and you got 30 or 40 different people in your ear just talking nonsense for 4 hours, that's information that your brain is processing. So think about it. If you're spending more time on these devices than you are actually reading a book or spending time with another human being, you can't tell me that that's not influencing how your mind is being shaped. And that's in social media is full of misinformation. How do you know the things that you are reading on social media are true? Right, y'all are probably following some famous people and stuff like that, and they are probably putting stuff out there, but how do you know that it's true? Are you using critical thinking skills? How are you fact checking the information that you're reading? Right, because there's some crazy people out there, famous included. Back in 2003 when LeBron got drafted, Kanye came out with his first album. I loved Kanye back then. Kanye was the coolest, most soulful dude in the world, but now I can't even listen to a word that comes out of his mouth. Even though I know he's still got a lot of people that follow him, and the stuff that he's putting out there is toxic. But that's all social media. Right, so I'm not blaming you for the disrespect that might be happening in this space, but it's really more about me trying to raise your awareness and your consciousness to be more mindful of how you are hooking into the technology. There was a movie that came out called The Matrix. Right, I don't know if y'all seen that movie, but The Matrix is all about, in the early 21st century, the world established artificial intelligence. AI woke up and became a sentient being, right? Like it started to think for itself. And then they saw us as a threat. And so they took over, and then they started plugging machines into the back of our head. That's the movie. But in real life, we're kind of in the matrix. We're not plugged in like that. We're plugged in like this. And it's not just y'all, it's adults too. I go to restaurants. I see a family sitting down. If the waitress or waiter is not there, getting their order, I can see a mom, dad, and their 2 kids all on their phones. And it's like, dang, y'all right there. You plugged in. And you're plugged in when you are still developing your overall being as a human. right? And so you're hooked in like that. It's influencing how you think and how you act, but it can also have personal long-term effects. Mental health, for one. People that are on social media or on online gaming, especially your 8 to 17-year-olds, if you're spending more than an hour per day on social media or on gaming, you are putting your mental health at risk. You stand a chance and an increased chance of depression, fear, anxiety, and anger. The uptick in hate speech is a result of fear and anger. Fear and anger drives hate. Right? So I'm seeing mental health happening right now, even though the people themselves might not realize that it's a mental health issue because they think it's normal. And they think it's normal because when you're on the social media feeds or if you're on the online gaming, that's what you hear all the time. So when you start to hear something over and over and over and over and over again, you start to believe it. That's just how the brain works. Right? So we gotta be worried about our mental health. Sleep. Man, I've got 4th grade kids talking about Mr. Brown, you know, my parents go to sleep, I wake up and I'm on Fortnite from like 10 o'clock at night until 4 in the morning. What time you wake up? 6:30 to go to school. So we got a lot of young people, and I ask yourself, are you getting 8 hours of sleep a night? Or are you putting the devices down at least an hour before you go to bed? Because if you're in the gaming world or if you're on TikTok, which moves so fast, I can't even keep up with it. That stuff is fast, right? And your brain has to stay connected to that. And so if you're on those social media devices or gaming until 9:30 and then you think you're finna just put it down and go to sleep, your brain is still moving fast when it should be in a state of slowing down. Right? So if you're engaged in that, you really need to step away from it at least an hour before you go to sleep so that you can make sure you get proper rest. And if you wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, don't pick up the phone. Right? Because then it'll keep you up for another hour or two. I was even guilty of that for a while until I started learning more about the impact of social media and technology in general. And so now me and my wife have had to develop discipline. Right? Because we got a kindergarten daughter and she already crazy about I want a cell phone. You're 5, 6 years old. Everybody else has a cell phone. Or she's looking at mommy and daddy on the cell phone, right? And so we're like, we need to start putting the phone away. My daughter doesn't even have it and she already going crazy. I'm like, man, you act like you on drugs or something. But that's how real it is, right? She don't even have it yet. Your social life starts to change, right? You spend more time on a device, or you withdraw yourself socially because you're in the gaming world. So now you're in these artificial communities and it makes it difficult for you to be in real spaces with people, right? Your attitude will start to shift. And then ultimately, it might not happen to you now in high school, but by the time you get into college or down the road, it's going to impact your performance as a human being. And again, right, like y'all are the first generation of young people to hook into technology like this. So they are going to study you for the next 20 years. Researchers are already trying to determine what is I think y'all might be Generation Z or something like that. They trying to figure out what's going to happen to y'all. Because your whole world was turned upside down March 13, 2020. But these things are real, and I do believe it is the social media and the online gaming that is driving the high levels of disrespect that I'm seeing amongst us in the human family, particularly in our learning environments. So some things that you can do here at a personal level is diversify your social media feeds. Be more aware and conscious of the information that is being fed to you on your Instagram accounts, your Snapchat accounts, right? Like, wake up and pay attention. And if you see like one narrative always coming your way, you know the algorithm is trying to feed you something. So then you need to make some tweaks. Right, I even do that. You know, I'm considered a conservative liberal, right? I'm kind of on the fence. But my family, my dad's side of the family, they're hardcore Democrats, and my in-laws are hardcore Republicans. All my dad and, well, my dad more than my mom, that's all he watches is CNN. That's it. So he's being fed one narrative. He won't even really go to the other side to see what the conservatives are talking about. But that's the same with my in-laws. They box all day, but they'll never lean over to the other side just to get a different point of view. I try not to get into all of that, but I always make sure I'm balanced in the things that I read and pay attention to. I want to hear what's going on both sides of the aisle. I'm not shutting down either side because at the end of the day, we still Americans. We're still supposed to be the United States of America, right? And if we're supposed to be united, we can't let beliefs and values divide us. We got to be able to sit down at the table and have a real conversation. But when we're trying to engage in dialogue on these devices, we can't understand context, we can't understand tone, and then it just ends up me against him. I'm gonna win and you gonna lose. That's not sustainable for us as a country. Because if you know anything about history, there's been 26 civilizations around the world throughout human history. And every last one of them collapsed the same way. And it wasn't external invasion. All great civilizations on this planet declined and fell because of internal decay. And if we're fighting each other and hating each other, to me, that's a sign of internal decay. So we have to start rebuilding our communities and start unplugging from these social media threads and actually start being in community with each other, hanging out with each other, hearing from each other, learning from each other, knowing that there's always more than one point of view. And when we can do that, we're going to change the game for this country. Critical thinking. I talked about that a little bit earlier. How do you know you're using critical thinking skills when you're spending that much time on social media or on these online devices? You got to wake up, young people. But when it comes back to Thunder Nation, it's as simple as this. Give respect to get respect. I live my life that way, and I have no regrets about the things that I've accomplished. But I do think one thing that has allowed me to find success in my life is that at the core of who I am, I love the human family. I have respect for you regardless of what you look like or where you come from. I learned from my own family that even those that might hate me because of the color of my skin, I will never turn and hate you. I will sit down and try to understand why you feel the way that you do about me. And then I will try to change your heart and your mind. That's what I stand for as a human being. And I know there's probably some people in here that's like, man, I'm not listening to a word that Mr. Brown has to say. And you can feel that way, but you know what? Even if I knew that, if you needed my help, and if you came to me, you don't have to apologize or anything. I got you. Because that's what this is about. You and I. Thunderbird community. How can we give respect to get respect, right? And remember that word respect was at the top of that pyramid, right before purpose and self-actualization. This is what it starts with, y'all. And this is what it ends with. It's just that simple. You don't have to be the jerks and talk bad about people or clown certain students because they might not be able-bodied. That's not cool. Right? I'm not saying that you got to have mad love for everybody, but we can at least respect each other. And this is my last slide. Like I said, I kind of consider myself the Dr. King of education. King was all about the beloved community. He first started fighting for the civil rights of Black Americans, but then he evolved into wanting to end poverty for all Americans, regardless of your skin color. And then he protested the Vietnam War because he believed in these three evils. He said that there are three evils to society: racism, militarism, and economic exploitation or consumerism. I think we're being victim to consumerism because of technology. Militarism is still real, right? We got military conflict in the Ukraine and in the Middle East, which is going to impact your future. We don't know what that's going to turn into. And I would say racism isn't one of the three, but I would just say there's a loss of love for each of us as a human family. Loss of love for the human family, to me, is that third. So how are we going to deal with those, right? You can't deal with, militarism, but you can deal with consumerism by unplugging from the technology and then engaging in trying to reestablish ourselves in a love for each other as a Baraboo community or as a Thunderbird nation. But Dr. King said, we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will perish together as fools. We are tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And as an educator, I love that line. Because I can't be the best human being that I can be unless I do what my purpose is, and that is to spread love for each other as a human family. And so if I'm not moving you in that way or helping you to be who you were meant to be, then I'm not who I was meant to be. And so your success supports my success and vice versa. And once we understand that we should be for each other and not against each other and competing against each other, y'all can change the world. I'm counting on you to change the world. Like I said, I'm 50. I'm on the back end. My daughter's 6. So my daughter will be growing up in a time where you all will be the superintendents and the principals and the police officers and the judges and the legislators in the state capitol and in our nation's capital, trying to keep this country great. I'm really counting on y'all. I love y'all. I thank you all for being a great group, an attentive group. I wish you all the best for the rest of your school year. I hope you all have an amazing summer. And peace out. Done.
All right, a few things here before you're excused. Let's give one more round of applause to Mr. Brown for that. I believe he'll be sticking around, so if you want to stop by and introduce yourself, you're more than welcome to. I'd also like to recognize one of our newest school board members is here, Miss Bonano. Bonano, sorry. So if we could give her a round of applause for coming. And then, again, before you're excused, we do have something that's pretty cool to the Baraboo community that's happening in this space right when we get done. So Miss Heather is going to quick talk about what's going on in the gym today.
Thank you, Mr. Constein. Thank you, Mr. Brown. We are really excited today. Today is our 6th annual Food for Kids event.